invest in this, right? If you see something coming up, down the pike and you see how valuable it potentially can be, how do you invest in it? How do you get in early? So we were trying to start with that with real estate, because obviously you talk about railroad, just in theory, you can kind of tap into that and buy land, and when tracks go through it, you can monetize it, whatever. So your land obviously goes up in value. So we actually had through other networks, past relationships and things, people who worked at the Warren Company, and they were sitting in a presentation, us was in the room, and they were talking about this grand plan. Maybe this was 3 or 4 years ago, and he told all of them in the room, hey, here's what we're gonna do. It's gonna be this series of negotiating with local governments, a series of digging holes, but it's really about the entry sites. So there's gonna be a very small footprint on the surface, wherever that entry site is, and it's only gonna be maybe the size of one single building lot or parcel. And so he said, this isn't a publicly traded company. You guys are gonna know where the proposed construction sites are. You guys should go start buying real estate across the country. And they were all like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So we were thinking about that, and we start buying up, an abandoned pizza parlor or donut shop, and one was actually a dental office, knowing that there would be this, loop, this underground loop entrance there. And that was a few years ago, and we decided not to for various reasons that I'll circle back to in a minute here, but that's kind of how we got interested in how we can contribute or what's real about the Hyperloop industry and where's it going. So I know Loop is not Hyperloop, but we'll talk about it. But that's kind of how we got our start. But in so doing as well, we started our research, wanted to learn more, and noticed there really is a lack of, or was, one single source of information about what's going on in the industry, who's covering what, media's talking about this, talking about that, a lot of skepticism, and then the nature of this subject matter is very complex, and I'm sure you all appreciate that in your own particular endeavors, but this isn't really a relatable subject matter, so there's nothing really like it, right? That's kind of the whole point. It's innovative, so it's hard to find truth or accurate updates out on the internet anywhere. So we recognized that and asked, is this a real problem? Is this a problem worth solving? Now, in kind of a business sense or a product development sense, you don't set down the path to build something, a widget, a phone, whatever, unless there's really a problem you're solving. People be willing to pay for something, or this problem is everywhere. So is this specific problem we noticed worth solving of Hyperloop information not being everywhere? So, we took a swing at it and said, yes, it is. Is my screen sharing okay? Are you seeing the slides?
You keep switching back and forth.
Oh, okay.
If you click the slide deck, now we can
Okay.
see it. Yeah, that's good.
Got it. Sorry, Brian. Okay, so we said, yeah, let's take a swing at solving it. And mission statements change it all the time, but let's try to empower the Hyperloop industry through education, connection, and exciting people. So if any of you are in the Hyper Co-op Slack workspace, that was part of our founding. So another one of our teammates, Steven, went hustling and kind of cold calling via social media, LinkedIn, and email all the Hyperloop teams a few years ago and tried to get them all in one Slack workspace. So that's something we thought was beneficial, and I know it's kind of generated other connections, very useful connections for people. So hopefully we can build upon that. We also started a lot of dialogue with various companies, groups, and even some influencers out there on social media. We're trying to get a website and a Hyperloop app stood up. We'll demo that at the end here. And then our, our whole theme is being culturally relevant. So, you know, there's a few people who have famously said, politics are downstream from culture. So, you know, everyone knows Musk, but I don't know if anyone in the room knows who the Minister of Transportation of Canada is. Does anybody know who that is? Nope. Okay. Yeah, a lot of. Sorry, I'm gonna switch back here so I can see you guys. Okay, yeah, a lot of blank stares. Nope. Maybe someone with a laptop looking up. Nope. Maybe playing Wordle. Okay, that's fine too. Yeah, so that's the point there, is politics is downstream from culture, so Hyperloop needs to be culturally relevant in order to, you know, really take off, because the politicians are gonna be the ones who actually buy off on this thing, make it legal, make it approved, make it certified, and accept all the work that, you know, Ryan at Transpod, all these other companies are gonna go through. So it needs to be culturally relevant, so social media and all that good stuff. So with that also, shifting gears a little bit to you know, just hold this today. You know, you Google trends Hyperloop, that term, and you know, I capped it off at January 1st of 2013. So there was, you know, nothing, flatline, right, dead before that. And then you see obviously the big surge there with the white paper release, and then really nothing. And you know, you see other surges and things, and there's a lot of activity that's taking place in terms of companies making deals, making political arrangements with various nations, various provinces, various states. But the thing that really gets people excited as we see these spikes are these videos, or these demos. So Hyperloop 1, before it was bought by Virgin, did the first public demo out in the desert in Las Vegas, Nevada. Boom, you know, next biggest hit in Google traffic. And then there was a lot of activity, a lot of engineering research, a lot of R&D, a lot of engineering development, all that good stuff. But, you know, and then even the SpaceX competition all throughout that, obviously Musk there, that's kind of the marker where that ends. But then you see another big spike when Virgin tests, you know, humans out, and I think they got them up to what, about 250 miles an hour, something like that. So, you know, you see that spike there. But to call out, you know, and then all the other stuff, right? Companies being founded, companies falling apart, dozens of academic teams such as yourselves, you know, being founded and working and all that good stuff. But not even a blip on the radar here on Google. There's been a barrage of activity over the last just few months here in 2022 with Virgin, right? Pivoting to cargo, and then everyone thinks Hyperloop is dead in the water, never gonna happen. But then, what, 1 week later, three weeks later, Transpod gets $500 million in funding, so that's massive. And then a few days after that, Musk gets on Twitter again and teases that the Boring Company is gonna get back involved with Hyperloop. So there's a lot going on, a lot to keep up with. And then even in some of these updates, there's a lot of data. So Transpod releases an 80-page feasibility study with, if none of y'all have read the whole thing, it's worth the read, maybe 5 or 6 cups of coffee, because it is quite lengthy. But the value, the impact, all that material is all in there, but it's not getting covered. It's not getting picked up. The media will still come out and say this is technology that's never gonna happen. And obviously y'all don't believe that because you're sitting in the room right now. So there's definitely a gap between public opinion, between how it's perceived, and that becomes a problem when you need to get this out to decision makers. And that, by the way, trickles down even more immediately to y'all when we start talking about y'all should garner more funding, more attention from your respective universities. Because this is the future, there is a lot of big money invested in this, but it's not perceived that way. So there's that disconnect. And that's one of the things, you know, one of the lofty goals we at Hypermap are trying to appreciate, trying to seek out and work towards. So one of those reasons for that kind of skepticism, the kind of, oh yeah, in a decade out there, in 2 decades out there, of Hyperloop is in construction, and what it actually takes to go from an idea on paper to a fully in production, you know, obviously certified, constructed, approved, tested system. And what's really cool is all of you individually are pursuing that experimentation and that work, you know, yourselves in a kind of a hands-on manner. So my hat's off to you. I never got to do that in my academic pursuits, but so my hat's really off to you. But you're getting a sense of real appreciation for what it takes to build something, make it work the way you intend it to work, and then test it, break it, and all that good stuff. So that's how modern day massive infrastructure projects are considered. Big, slow, massive investment, ridiculous amounts of labor. And the big point here is because a lot of these systems are still being implemented, thought of, designed, and invested in the same approach or the same model that they've been using for 100 years, over 100 years. So when rail went across Europe, went across the States, went across Canada, fundamentally, those same construction practices, ways of thinking, ways of legitimizing and getting the approval for the project, that's still today. Yeah, okay, a little bit here and there is improved, but that's still how these projects, massive infrastructure transportation projects, are going on today. And one note on that is that necessitates, or that depends on a system of one input of work, whatever that input is, energy, dollars, whatever it is. One input of work really results in one output of value across a system at scale. So you're talking about laying track, you're talking about someone getting on the train, even the train moving cargo, it's still this kind of one for one. So that's, you know, a lot to say of modern construction, modern infrastructure, and one of the reasons why Hyperloop is thought of in this way and not as, and there's still a lot of skepticism around it, because of this paradigm, this old construction paradigm. But that's not how Hyperloop is going to be built. And in fact, that's not how many of the products and services that we all know and love today are built. So, you know, over the last 20, 25 years, obviously Silicon Valley and others make good software. You know, some of you are on it right now. I mean, we're using it right now to do this. Good software is not built in that manner. Good software, and this is an Eric, I don't know how many of you are software engineers in the room, and show of hands, anyone?
No one.
And no? Okay, well good then, this is all they do, and enlightening, I hope. Good software is built in an approach called like a MVP, most valuable part, minimal viable product. So all of you growing up with smartphones, apps, someone shout out, what's your favorite app you're using right now? Whatever.
YouTube.
YouTube? Perfect, great, perfect example. So, all the features you're used to now, I mean, what's the new big one, YouTube Shorts? None of that stuff that really differentiates YouTube and makes you love that app was even thought of when YouTube was constructed and eventually bought by Google. So, if the end state of whatever you're trying to build is a way to transport you from A to B and some of your goods, well, in software, I can give you, the equivalent of a skateboard, and it can still deliver value to you. And then, as you're using that value, as you're working with it, wrestling with it, experimenting with it, do you pick it up and never use the app again after the first time? Or do you keep using it and want more, want it to do more, because it helps you so much? Then it can, the developers, the company can turn it into, augment it to a scooter, augment it to a bicycle. Now there's even more value, now there's even more learning. Now you're even experiencing something you didn't know you needed, because now you can maybe put a little cargo on that bicycle. Same thing with, evolving it to a motorcycle and then eventually a car. It's these phased approaches where the value scales. And the value scales not one for one, but the value begins to scale almost exponentially. As opposed to this initial user on the top here, I can't deliver them anything initially. I can't deliver them any component of my massive system initially, and they get any value out of it. So, case in point with old construction. If I just give you a few rail ties and the track, nothing. You get no value out of it. So I need to further invest and get everything out there before one user, before one cargo company even gets to experience value out of that system. So traditional way of building things, new software way of building things. MVP style, and obviously there's applications and nuances when you apply that to hardware, but basically the theme there. So just a graphic of, you put out something, and then you think it's perfect, and then it falls flat on its face. And now you have to continuously add improvements, adjust the comfortability of seats or connections on a rail car would be the example, whereas if you have enough of the system built and released, you can kind of see this up and to the right value and success, and that is how all these brand companies actually release their products that we all are very much used to enjoying and have grown with and have seen new features come out and have noticed them, and they work really well because they practice this principle. So that is how Hyperloop is going to be built. That is how this industry, these companies are pursuing fundamentally, or kind of at a principle level, the approach to this construction. So if you read some of these feasibility studies, for example, that Ryan at Transpod released with Alberta, it's going to cost them something like, I think the last number was 18 to 22 billion to do just the Alberta route, okay? But they're only going to they just got 500 million for kind of that MVP version, if you would, which they're going to start out at the airport. So that theme, and this is a screen grab from their feasibility study, that theme there is how this is being pursued. So every single Hyperloop company is doing this exact same approach. So with their respective testing and certification centers. So this is kind of a blend of, some may call it the perfect, or at least a very good blend of the best principles of successful software combined with massive infrastructure projects in order to make this stuff successful, in order to make this stuff feasible, believable, scalable, most importantly profitable, because they're not going to garner the investment needed to actually do this unless they have a good business case. And another thing that comes out in all the feasibility studies is, much like those successful software companies that we're all familiar with, they're money printing machines, right? Billions of dollars of revenue, but they didn't start that way. They really did phase up. Well, based on the energy consumption, some of the maintenance, but energy back into the grid, because a lot of this is solar. These things, these systems, these hyperloop systems at scale become money for individuals. They really do. Now that's over the decades, but there's another doctor out there, Alan James. He used to work at Virgin. He started his own consultancy. He's out of England. He did a keynote at the kickoff of the European Hyperloop Center, and he even kind of coined the term mobility as a service. So when we're used to software as a service with Netflix, Salesforce, Facebook, all these kind of quote unquote services, utilities, if you will, software as a service, what about the idea of mobility as a service? So that changes the entire paradigm of what we're used to. You don't need to own a car. A trucking or material company, a logistics company, does not need to own vehicles. Just as a lot of the companies now don't need to own their own servers, they're in the cloud. They're using software data as a service. Same thing here, mobility as a service. It's a radical concept, but it's possible now because of these principles that they're using to get these systems off the ground. With that, I know, how much time do we got left?
You can take like 15 more minutes.
Okay, any questions on that content on the slides? Yeah.
Yeah, not necessarily on the slide content, but just being on your website here. If we drop you an email, we'd love to be a part of your. We're not on your hypermap. We're Hyperlink out of London.
Okay. Maybe it's the accent or your distance, but I don't care where it is.
So we're Hyperlink out of London.
Yeah, don't be shy here.
You're right.
Me, yeah.
Yes, we're Hyperlink out of London, and we've just been on your website, and we can't see ourselves. We'd love to contact you, join the Slack team, and get involved.
Perfect. Krista, can you be our eyes and ears and hands?
Yep.
Perfect.
Cheers.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, anybody else with the boring academic content? I didn't want to give college kids a lecture, but that's kind of what some of this is. So.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
No.
No. Okay, hello. Now, is it better?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah, perfect.
so on MVPs, it's kind of straightforward how you do that in software, but how would you iterate in Hyperloop? How do you deliver that final product without the large investment? Do you mean like a small size track, like 2 kilometers? But even if you have a 2-kilometer track, you can't really show the value of having like a 200-kilometer track. So how
Perfect
do you?
question. That's exactly the thinking that we need to keep pursuing. That perfect question. So these test tracks, these certification centers, are anywhere from 5 to 10 kilometers long. So they are the enough distances to at least test max speed. Is the point here. So it is a little nuanced, as you're already alluding to when you start talking about hardware. But what I would equate it to is, the best comparison is, the first Model S Tesla had XYZ features in it, but it had the core components today that all the Teslas out on the road still have. So good, radically improved battery technology, braking that transfer energy, even the cameras and the data gathering mechanisms on the car, all those still exist today, and all those were core components. So same thing, when you start talking MVP with hardware, you need the core components to work initially, and then you test that fast and break that fast and fail fast, all kind of safely. Does that answer some of that question?
Yeah, that makes sense. What I'm kind of, my let's say, issue here is that.
Here, you have to also, talk next to the speaker, but say your question to them too. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, how do I?
We can hear you, that's fine.
Yeah, right there.
No, my question is, wait up, I lost my train of thought.
What features are gonna be added in?
Your train of thought?
Yes, exactly. No, so like Hyperloop obviously, if it works, would be cool, because it's fast and sustainable and everything, but like, the issue could be scalability rather than the technology. I think the technology is, we're certain it is going to be better, but the issue is the cost and the trade-off and like the time to build it at scale, rather than whether or not we will build it. So how do we MVP the scalability? Is I think my question.
Very, very well, very well. Okay, so even going beyond the testing centers, scalability, when you're talking about software, demands value. Measurable, practical value. So when we talk about a Hyperloop, the real value is in a network, a national or continental network that's uniting regions and geographies of city clusters together. So the whole route of Alberta from Edmonton to Calgary and airport in between and even Red Deer in between, that right there is going to be a MVP, if you will.
Okay.
So you just united 3 cities in one region. You have to prove that all the economics and models of environmental footprint impacts, revenue, energy consumption and energy production, you have to prove that all that's there. You have to prove the value's there with your first release, if you will. That will likely be the first one, if not in the Middle East, that does that. Then once you do that, you say, hey, by the way, the exact same system now scales if I connect, I don't know what you would, from Alberta, maybe Boise, but the principle is then proved, and now you can start scaling that cities to cities, regions to regions.
So you think we can extrapolate like ticket costs or like the infrastructure costs to different areas in that case, similar areas?
100% yes, because you will now have measurable proof on exactly what input of Hyperloop results in how many outputs.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Okay,
I hope so.
I'm gonna stop holding the mic now.
Cool. Now, just show the room, I don't know how you would wave your hands or anything. Was this new information, or did you already know all this? Okay, one guy responded, okay, great, cool.
There's a couple people you can't see because the camera's not wide enough of an angle.
Give it 10.
Okay,
Yeah, I can maybe shift it.
so,
Yeah, like he can't even see where I'm sitting.
oh, so many more people! So if there are any more questions, I'd love to talk to you. By the way, feel free, Krista has all our contact information. If you're not following us on the socials yet already or in the Slack, we'll do that. But what I also wanted to share was kind of where we're at with our app. So we haven't plugged this and we haven't gone. Is it sharing? Is it coming through?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so we haven't, gone big on the advertising or blasting on social media just quite yet, because we're still working through some things, but you can all go to this right now on your phones or on your laptops, hypermap.co. And here we're laying out all the route proposals from the various companies. Now, we've been looking at this for quite a while, and what we're sticking to presently right now is all the route proposals that are actively listed or publicly available by the respective companies. So we actually have, I think, on this particular app right now, I think we have about 50 maybe more like 30 routes from the various companies on here, but on our back end, on our system, and kind of hidden on this view right now, we have over 110 proposals, past proposals, all from various companies. So we're gonna get all those out too, but the way one would for now use this site is to say, okay, there's HTT, where are their routes, where are their proposals? And oh, by the way, if there are sections to them or different options of them, you know, you can kind of see those here on the map. You reset that. So for TransPod, right, so you guys just had Ryan in, and that's awesome. He's phenomenal, he's a genius, he's gonna change the world. But so, you know, on their long PDF there, you know, they have a lot of information about this Alberta route. And they call it out into various sections. So, you know, the section of downtown Edmonton, the section of the central corridor, the approach zone with the Calgary Airport and Calgary downtown. So on our app here, what we're trying to do is take as much of the information out there published by the companies and then make that accessible, make that a little more interactive, make that a little more easy to digest on our app, and calling out, you know, text from their study, thoughts of theirs, the options there, you know, okay, great. Now we've looked at the Edmonton stations, you know, okay, here is that kind of, right, MVP, or the first version, the first phase of what they're looking for here at the airport, right? So, you know, a view there organized into sections, but obviously there's a long central corridor, and they have a few different options for that, each with different pros and cons and thoughts of their own. You know, zoom into what they're calling in their PDF the approach zone, where, you know, obviously max speed or high speed would be reduced, and you begin to make departures or transitions to the airport, and then even, you know, the different options they're currently considering for the downtown. So what we're trying to do is apply this kind of structured visual approach, taking these 120 or these 80-page PDFs or these press releases that are chock full of good information, and, you know, their YouTube videos also, and lay those out with the proposals that the companies are currently sharing and publicizing. So same thing, you know, we try to do this for all the companies, and put out what they have. You can put the little YouTube video there, learn a little more, and et cetera, et cetera. Zelleros is a little interesting because their proposals are very visionary at this stage, but they actually have a very cool PDF. Maybe some of you have read it, about the different directions and about the different continental, you know, networks. So we talk about MVP. So if you think about Alberta there, right? This is their vision at scale. So this is their vision, I believe, for the year 2050 at scale. So we're going to be adding a lot more content around the various sections they call out, and kind of updating our map as more information comes out there. But, you know, Hart, very ambitious, very strong, very talented there, and they have different kind of phases of their various proposals as well. So definitely check that out. Boring Company is on here too, because you know, there's future synergies there. So we're tracking the status of all of these proposals. So, you know, there's really only one or two of these, Alberta being one that has funding. So soon on the app there'll be statuses. We can sort and filter by funding, proposal, feasibility studies released, that type of thing. And then right now we have all the teams listed as well. So where are we at here? Where's Waterloo here? There you go. That'd work, huh? So, you know, there's some details of whatever video we've most recently, you know, seen on the various YouTube channels. Here's socials, and we're gonna add some more content on the teams there too. But we envision, right, trying to strive for a single source of information. If you guys have videos, if you guys have content, if you guys have PDFs, we would love to hang it on here if you're cool with that. If not, that's okay too. But you know, all the teams here, we're trying to do as much as we can to help in whatever way we're equipped to help. So we got a savvy developer here, we'll eventually merge the teams and the companies tab, but, anything there, I know I'm coming close to time, but, I'll stop sharing. Any other questions?
Here, let me move this screen
Oh
over.
no, I came back, I was sharing my screen, and people left the room. Oh my.
Everybody has jury interviews right now too, so if people are getting up and leaving, it's because I have to go down to the bank. Yeah.
Got it.
Oh, my headset's in the way. Oh, you're like right center. Even like the final design reports you guys submitted for this competition could be put on the website if you did want that. This is, so Zach, this is, in the back we have Polyloop, and then in the front we have a member from Riders Unite Group as well, just so you know.
Oh, great. Hey, you gotta change that name, I hear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Well, hold on. Here.
Their new name?
Whenever things go out of style, whenever they go out of fad, I try to get them and save them as an artifact. So, I don't know if you can see.
Oh, it's so blurry. Yeah.
It's Ryerson Rams. I got a Ryerson Rams shirt, but anyway. All right, so any other questions or thoughts? Please check out the app. Please, if it breaks or it sucks, please let us know. You won't hurt our feelings. We're trying to, you know, do that rapidly learn mentality, right? Lean approach, MVP approach. So if something really sucks or you notice like, hey, this app crashed and it doesn't look right on my phone, we can get better only by your feedback. So much appreciated. And then, you know, content-wise or any connection-wise, anything, you know, you really think you could get value from us, or if we could help in any way, that's kind of what we're trying to do. So I know the audience here is rather specific, right? Hyperloop teams, particularly in Canada, but you know, we want to help. We believe in the long-term vision. So anything we can do to help you guys. Well, that's it for me. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate you zooming in on your Saturday. It's really great.
You guys are there, right? I gotta,
Yeah.
you know, that check too, right?
Alright, cool. Well, thanks so much.
The workshop?
If you do need, if this wasn't a complete waste of time, and you think that the value in doing, I do have time tomorrow too, depending if that would help you, only if it would help.
Yeah, tomorrow we're gonna be at the test track pretty much all day, but if plans change, I can
Oh,
let you know.
never mind that.
Okay.
Have fun outside,
Alright, cool. Well, thanks so
All
much.
right. definitely.
Alright, bye. Cool. Thanks for coming, guys. If you want to follow us on Instagram and Twitter, hyper_map. I'm kind of in charge of social media for the most part, and I've been quite busy with this competition. So once this is done, we're gonna have more consistent posts, and I think, yeah, overall, just Hypermap is a really great way to connect consumers with the future of transportation, and it's really cool because you kind of are all a part of the future of transportation, no matter how small you think your role is. It is a role, and it is important. Yeah, so if you guys want to give us a follow, and it is our intention also in the future to do like team features. So if you would like your team featured, we can do that, we can make that happen. And if you want to join the Hyper Co-op Slack space, you can let me know, and I can just like send you guys an email invite as well. Yeah. All right. So there is other workshops happening right now. There's one right next door. It's somebody from Fridays for Future, which is Greta Thunberg's organization, about spreading awareness about climate change. So he's in that room. And then Mini Gupta is presenting on the roles of engineers in beyond product design in room 3102, if you're interested. Or if you have jury interviews, those are for priority definitely. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy that. Awesome. No, I got this really good show. No, I go watch it. So I would've been super cool. That one you came in front, guys. So I don't have that thing. Thank you. See you. Bye, guys.
Alright, so we're gonna head over to the next workshop. So if you want to type in the chat which one you want to go to, so the Fridays for future, or the Metrolinks, thank you, the Metrolinks one, just let me know, we can go to whichever one you want. The Friday one is right here, we can walk over to the other one. One viewer is your call, which workshop you want to go to. So we have this one or this one. If you don't let me know which one, I'll just go to whichever one. We'll go to the, we'll head over to the 3.0 roles of product engineering.
No one can take them out because they're stuck behind the glass now. So those will probably be there when you come to university.
Yeah, these workshops
Do you
now.
want to fill in for Lily?
Which one?
The room right here. 3102.
Who's that one?
Lily right there. There's
How is no one going to that? Where is? I was going to that one. Where is it?
It's right here too. I think, I mean, it's a French room.
That one seems so cool.
I know. Oh, do you guys want to go to a Lily workshop?
Yeah, we actually have a presentation to do.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's very good. Yeah.
Where's
Good luck.
Gavin actually? Are you from Alberta?
No, the black t-shirts are from here. Waterloo.
Oh, what are you? Okay.
Yeah. Good luck.
I don't know if this door.
Oh.
You're the staff, right?
Yeah,
I'm the
yeah. Oh, we're on the same team. Oh, nice. Nice. You go to Waterloo?
Yeah, for mechanical engineering.
Oh, nice. I'm going into that in the fall.
Okay.
How is it here?
It's good.
Yeah. Is it tough?
Yeah, a little bit.
What year?
I just was 1 week.
It was really tough, or?
I mean, 1A was crazy hard, but 1B got a lot better.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, everything to do with construction. The thing was never finished. We disrupt to build a better tomorrow. How's that?
All I see is more disruption. I mean, at this point, you come wanting to.
But you know what? I mean, unless that disruption doesn't happen today,
Yeah.
you're not going to get tomorrow. Like the subway system. Imagine that the subway systems were built. I think they were built in 1957. Yeah. Yeah. Let me check. I was with TTC a few years ago, so I used to know those dates very well.
Did it make you memorize it?
Nah. You know, you just talk, you know, the era, the TTC era. So, see, in fact,
Oh, isn't it just like the people also? When it's TC?
I'm gonna go and try and corral more people into the workshop rooms. A lot of people are in jury interviews right now, unfortunately.
no, that's fine.
Okay,
I love this group.
okay, good. They look great. Okay, awesome.
They'll keep me entertained.
Okay.
Yeah, we're project people, so it's very nerve-wracking. I mean, I see 202, and I'm like, I haven't begun. I need to get it going.
fine.
I personally don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever you guys work with.
If it helps you project better, then by all means.
I'll just. So, yeah. So if you don't build tunnels, like, the tunnels is the big part, the tunnels, the stations, the entrances, those are big parts of any build. And disruption. It's a part of it. But like we try to get it done on time.
I mean, what were the major disruptions though? Why is it still not been
Sorry?
completed? Why is it what was the major disruptions with what's going on? What?
So first of all, it's a new model. So LRT, I mean, we have seen it in street cars in Toronto, right? But they were all above grade. So we call them at grade vehicles that's running. Eglinton LRT, it's a 20-kilometer line, and 10 kilometers is underground. So just the complexity of building those, having those tunnels bored, it's huge. It's huge. And so one, tunnel is just the structure you've created inside. But over and above now, you need to make sure it is, there are no leakages, and and evacuation. So every time I cringe when it's underground, because you have to make sure safety procedures for evacuation, for emergency planning. You have to think of the worst scenario and then plan to it, and then build structures so that evacuation is possible. So those are some of the challenges as we go along, we face. So that's the reason any project would take about 6-7 years
Yeah.
to get it fully commissioned, and it may just take longer. COVID was not the greatest time, even though one would assume that if there were no cars on the road, you could have done so much more building, but then there were no people as well on the road available. The whole supply chain shortage is now coming to hit us hard, and very hard. It's been very hard on our industry. We've started seeing strikes, union strikes. That's sometimes we need to worry about. So just some of the few things that result in delays, but not too much. When you're doing a big project, even let's take your home. If you do a home renovation, everything is not going to go smooth or seamless. So there will be some kinks that you have to go get over that hood for that. And that's how we work. But these are like billion-dollar projects.
Sorry. No, it's interesting because you hear people make fun of it all the time.
And that I can understand. If I was on the other side as well, I would. But the pains that we take to make sure. So, and this is something. Maybe I should just stop my presentation. I'm ready to get it. So anyway, so when I was asked to speak, I said, do I go technical? And I said to myself, no, I don't think so, because you're in an engineering school, you're doing your technical, you will know. So I think it was, so something that I wanted to touch upon was the role of engineers beyond just designing a system, an equipment. So right now, today, you have Hyperloop that you're developing, but how do you bring a concept to actually completion? I think that's the big question. And how would you do that? So as engineers, you just have to, of course, engineering design is great, but then there's this other part of it that you need to think about. You need to think about how do we, I'm going to go to this one. So if you see this from, so how do you go even for Hyperloop or any other product that you design? You have to make sure you get people on the table. You need to bring policymakers. You need to bring funding for your research. So you need to find institutionalized investors. Either they would be government, or they would be investors from other companies, or that see a promise in your product. And then you start developing the technical feasibility of what's going to be possible. And of course, with that comes the cost-benefit analysis that you need to kind of take care of. And that's where the business case comes in. Lots of legal documentation. So as engineers, you would say, well, that's a lawyer's job. No, that's not a lawyer's job. You end up part of the legal agreement. You need to understand it. You need to know what are your roles, your responsibilities, your accountabilities that you're being, that the corporate is going to sign up for. And you, and as a project delivery team, your head is there. Like, you are accountable for it, for every dollar you spend. And of course, then if it's large infrastructure projects, you need to do an environmental assessment. Huge issue these days. We need to make sure that we have, in environmental, and I know there's environmental person here, oh no, he went away. But if when you see the environmental design students, and what their role is to ensure any species that are endangered, they need to be protected. So, and a good example is when we were doing for Euro-Ontario LRT, and you have Port Credit, you have a Mary Fix creek there. Lots of endangered species are there. So how do you protect that? That becomes part of our problem. So while we think product design, we are good, but then these are the different aspects that you now need to kind of look at, think about it, take care of it, and then move on. And of course, finally, stakeholder consultations. So like you mentioned about disruptions, all our customers or all our clients are or stakeholders are the ones that are store owners. They are impacted. They're impacted for 4 years. Their businesses are impacted. So how do we work with them? How do we collaborate with them? And yes, as engineers, you are always sought to. So while stakeholder consultation, you would say, well, that's customer relations. That's not my job. No, it is still your job, because they will finally come up to you and say, how can you design so that I can get people working from here to there without disruption? You as engineers, you need to design and tell me. We will go and explain it to the people in the language that it's understandable to them, but we as engineers have to provide that information to them. So in all these aspects, you are the fundamental givers of information. So this is when we haven't even started talking about the project as a goal. This is just a concept. So years, and especially with large infrastructure project, and I mean, I'm focusing on Hyperloop today because that is going to be a large infrastructure project. And if that's what it's going to be, you will have to sit down and get through all these aspects. And this is just a quick cheat sheet that I've prepared, but this is much bigger than that. It takes years and years to get everybody on the table and talk in a language that they understand. Not everyone is an engineer. As an engineer, from me to you, we will understand the terminologies. But when we talk to the government, when we talk to the lawyers, it's a different audience. So the communication skills, and if you go to the PEO website, they talk about 4 big aspects that they require from an engineer. And one aspect is the communication skills. How you communicate with your audience. You need to know your audience, and you need to speak to the audience for them to understand in the way they understand. So, this is just, and once you do this, years have passed by, and that's when they decide whether the project is going to be a go or a no-go. And if it's a go, great, we all are happy. We start working on the contracting models. Now, and I'll just kind of touch upon the contracting model because that's a very interesting part as well. That how things have progressed. What you would have learned or what you would have seen till date is you know what you want. And I'll just go back one slide. So there are 3 types of project delivery models that we are working on. So the conventional one is this one. So until 2000, and I'm talking about Toronto, until 2010, 2012, that was the model. I know what I want. You as a contractor give me that. So I'm going to specify exactly what I need. And the relationship, if you see, is the owner, he has a designer, he or she. I need to make sure it's he or she. We have a designer, and the owner will have a contractor. So you are in have a contract with this contractor, and the contractor will have a subcontractor. So once you decide you have this kind of a model, you are telling them, this is what I want. We have now progressed forward. Rapid transit systems, hospitals. And usually these models, and I'll give you again an example of transit systems. If TTC is going to procure a vehicle, their infrastructure is set. There's not going to be much different. So you exactly need to tell them, this is what I want. You take rapid transit systems, Eglinton LRT, Huron Ontario LRT. We have the new line coming up, Ontario line. It's a new build, even from infrastructure to the systems. And at this time, we are saying, it was a big debate in our heads. Do we tell them what we want? Or do we, because what happens is, now I as a client need to spend time defining that specification. So I will spend 4 years defining the specification. The contractor will take another 2 years, understanding it and developing it. So we are losing time. Is there a better model out there? Is there a better project delivery model out there where the owner tells the contractor, I want a system that will allow 2 minutes every time a train is passing at any point of time. And I'm giving a hypothetical example, but I'm giving you the performance. I'm trying to understand, I'm going to give you what I need from the system. You go, you develop it. And then that's when, if you now see the relationship, the owner only has told him, I want this as an output. The contractor goes and defines what needs to be developed. And he will develop his own specifications and so on and so forth, and he will build. So that's where he gets the designer. Now you see how we have moved from this designer from the owner to designer to the contractor and the subcontractor. What's the role of the owner? The owner needs to make sure that whatever is being built is to a good state of art. So that's something that we do put in the specification. We shouldn't be putting like a 20-year-old system in place, right? So we need to make sure that the design excellence is part of that specification that we give them. And that's how the models that we are working with, especially with the rapid transit system, is what we are getting at this part of the model. Of course, every contractor, every build, there are some good learnings that you come out of. And there is a third type of model that we are now looking at, and that's the alliance model. And I use this, and I put Hyperloop and a question mark, because this would be probably this kind of a model. Why? Owner, when I say owner, it's the funding partner. The funding partner will say, I have this much money, I need to build something. I'm not expecting the owner to now have high hire designers because that's never existed. So you would have the designer, the owner, and the contractor all in partnership and say, let's design the system together. I am going to be, and you will hear this in engineering world a lot, I'm going to be party to your risks. If it fails, we all fail together. If we succeed, we all succeed together. Whereas none of those two other models have that. That was, it's a contract, it's in stone. If you do not do this, you will pay penalty. Here, we all are sharing the risk. And this is the way you can start thinking about getting new systems, new technologies implemented. I mean, this is again another model that we are going to look at. Go ahead.
So I hear the public-private partnership model, project delivery method law. Which one would that fall under? Design build.
P3, public-private partnership.
Yeah.
And in this model, what we are saying is we as owners, I'm not paying you.
Yeah.
Contractor, you need to get all the money yourself, and I'm not going to pay you to the end of the project. So if the project is for 4 or 5 years, you're not getting, there is a slight, after 25 million, I'll give you this much, I'll give you 5% or I'll give you 10%, but it's very minimum. Whereas in this model, you will have very defined milestones, and you will get that money. You will get 10%, you will get 20%, and so the contractor is happy. Here, the contractor is at risk because it's his money, it's his lenders that he has to look at to get the money. Whereas in this, we are saying, let's develop it together, and we will define the payment packages as the designs come along, and there will be these payment terms that will be there. And there is incentive as well, because we don't want the contractor to run away. So there will be those incentives and penalties for sure, but that's something that we.
So design build is no payment until project delivery, like full delivery, or
Which one?
design and build.
Design build, it's, so the maximum number of money
Yeah.
is not provided, not given to you, and there will be some money, if it's $1 billion, it's like, we'll give you 1 million, over the period. But the entire payment will be made towards the end, will be throughout the 30 years term. So there is always this how many years term, and it will be shared between that 30 years.
Okay.
So it's huge benefit for, but not benefit, but it's almost like the subscription model,
Yeah.
right? So the contractor keeps getting that money over time. The owner doesn't need to have upfront cash, and it benefits both. Okay, so this is about some of the project delivery model. Now you see, now if you look at this, we went from trying to get people on the table, getting an agreement from there, getting the project to a go, and that's when you decide what kind of a contracting model do you take. I put this next slide here, which is developing the transit projects. What happens is, especially as infrastructure transit projects, it goes through municipalities. Now municipalities need to have age-old systems. They may want to be doing some kind of a digging at some point of time to get their sewage system in place, their utilities all upgraded and so on. So as government agencies, in these kind of models, what we do is we say, what are the municipalities? You tell me what were your projects? What were the things that you wanted to do? We are going to dig up Huron, Ontario anyway. As part of that, I'm going to shell, and of course, it's not a Metrolinx or it's not a transit agency that will fund, but your cost will become minimal because I was digging up anyway. And this is where, to your question about disruption, is more of that. If you go to Huron, Ontario today, the last 2 years, we were only working on the utilities. We did not dig the ground for tracks. It's only this year we have started, the first set of tracks have gone into the ground. But for the last 3 years, it was just doing all the utilities. So huge benefit to the entire municipalities that we could do these kind of projects. So that is the first, and that's why I said that this comes, after that, understanding what are the alliances we can create. And of course, after that is, so while these projects are happening, now comes the real aspect of the contractor now provides us designs. He tells us, have a look, he or she. They say, have a look. As owners, we look at it and we say, yeah, we kind of go back and forth. And we have our say. We say, no, this is not what we were expecting. And then there are a lot of dialogues that happen. And that's where, again, engineering plays a huge, huge role in making sure that, we make sure the engineered systems are properly engineered. It's not a half-baked job. Integration is huge. Any system, integration. And that's our weakest link. You need to make sure integration is well thought of. Codes, standards, regulations. There are codes, there are standards. So when I work on these systems, I mean, we have ESA, which is a Canadian Electrical Safety Authority standard, but there may be other regulations that we take from Europe, because we do not have a well-defined regulation that probably complies. So we look at what are the best regulations out there in the market. I mean, and in my world, we use EN 50126, which is Senelec regulation. Again, that what it does is it just ensures that you follow a proper methodology, so that you are ensuring that your systems are either as per code, they are being safety certified adequately. You have considered all the aspects to make sure that at the end of the day your system is safe. And big one, emergency evacuation response planning. People do not give it as much importance as it should be given. We need to think, we need to put our heads around how do we make sure in case something goes wrong, human life is not lost. That worries the engineers to no end. If there's something that keeps me awake at night, is I hope none of my systems have any kinks in it. And as engineers, that's the social responsibility that we carry with ourselves forever. Even today, if, and probably I know I started my presentation halfway, but I've been part of the subway rocket project, the Union Pearson Express project. Every time the train is running, it's scary. You feel the nervousness, because the day something goes wrong, I mean, you cannot personally accept it yourself. So safety certification, very important. And I'm sure as we go through the presentation, you'll continuously see I'm talking about it, or I keep rambling about it, because there's nothing more important than that. We build the civil infrastructure, but then at the end of the day, it's the systems, making sure the systems are safe and we're good to go. Something that you will, I'm sure you may have heard in your engineering classes is RAMs, reliability, availability, maintainability. And okay, so this is another aspect. So RAMs is reliability, availability, maintainability, and safety. But I always keep, how do you make sure, Hyperloop, how is it safe? Or how reliable is it? Imagine you run it one time and then it falls apart. What do you do? So it's not a reliable system. don't want to use it again and again. Similarly, availability, in transit terms we say, if your vehicle is going, or if you have issues on your systems or the subsystems, then it's not available. When the train is supposed to go out in service and suddenly it's not available, it's gone. And maintainability, any system, and I'm sure you as engineers, any system that you develop, it needs to be maintained over time. There is a planned maintenance. How do you maintain it? Imagine you make a nice fancy system and you've put a block of I'm not saying fabric. I think it's anyway, a material around it with no doors. How do you access it? It's not maintainable. So that's another big area that to make any system functional, you need to make sure it's reliable, it's available, and it's maintainable, and of course safety. And the last part is of course operability. How does it operate? Yeah, I think I was talking to the keynote speaker right now, Dr. Jensen, I believe, and he was mentioning about how they're working with airline pilots that they become operators of their transports. So while you can develop the best engineered system, if you do not have somebody who can operate it, it doesn't work. So anyway, so this is, and these are the things that you think during the design phase. Because once you allow the contractor to proceed from the design phase, you're done. He's not looking back. They're going to say, you agreed, you approved this design. So that's where engineers play a big role in making sure that the engineering is to the quality that they want. Again, construction, installation, testing, commissioning. I don't want to bore you with a lot of that, but those are the things. And last but not the least, I don't know if you have in your courses talked about system assurance. System assurance. So this is again safety. You see safety. Everywhere safety. How do you make sure your requirements go from a concept to an actual something that is tangible? You test it, and then you reverse. It's called as a V model. If you're interested, it's a good sleeping time document to read. But it's called the V model, and you will be able to see how we trace it back to the requirements. And that's how we ensure that whatever we requested for is what we got. Okay? Hazard identification, and so I'm not going to touch upon this because I'm sure you'll get bored, but this is another very important topic for us. Right from the day we start our project, we say, what are the hazards? Person falling from the train. Fire, the train catching fire. These are hazards that will exist. But then how do you mitigate it? So you analyze it, and then how do you mitigate it? And that again goes into the design. So from here we go back to the engineered system design. So it's always a feedback process that we keep following. At the end of the day, all we want is the system is safe, systems are built as per requirements, and it is operating, it can operate and it can be maintained. That's project 101. That's it. You do this, you're good. But it takes 7 years, or whatever number of years that we need, it takes there. How much? What's the time? Oh, it's 2:32. Do you want to just do questions, or do you want me to go through anything else? I mean, in my career, and I have a long career, I've seen maglev from concept to now coming into existence or is in existence. Hydrogen fuel cells. It was a concept. Few years ago it was a concept, but we got, now it's running in Germany. And there were talks about us having locomotives of that kind. Things did not work out with them. And the next big one is Hyperloop, which we're here today for, right? So it's exciting times, and really seeing seeing the passion down at the floor. I know Waterloo, we interviewed Queens, and it's, people are working on it. So it's engineers like you that will bring it to fruition. And I always go with this saying, Carmen once said, and Carmen is a guru in aeronautics, the jet propulsion lab that's there in Caltech, it's his creation. So he once said, scientists study the world as it is. They just observe the world and they discover that world. But engineers create the world that was never there. So we are the creators of the world that's there today. So. And now I can just take questions. Ask me anything. What's in your mind? What do you think about? Yeah, it should be good. Any questions? Go ahead.
When it comes to designing, like let's say, like you're going through the steps and whatnot, like when do you know when to stop? Like I know you could like meet the requirements and whatnot, but then what if you want to exceed the requirements? Where do you land on that? Like once you meet the set requirements you set at the beginning, is that the end of it? Or do you just keep pushing forward if you know that there's an improvement you can make?
And this is where that iterative design model will help you. Because you have to stop somewhere. And this is a very good question, and that's a pain point we all engineers face. We want to do it better. We want to continually make it better. But you're still in a product design stage, or you're still in a prototype stage. Your funding is going to run out. You need to put something out there that will benefit the community, that will benefit the society. And that's what we should not forget as well. So at some point you have to say, this is good, this is safe, and then so the Japanese technology of trains, the high-speed trains, if they wanted to make it better, but they introduced the Shinkansens and the bullet trains into service, but their research team continued to evolve. And that's how maglev came into being. And of course, maglev has many other areas that had interest. But so you need to, at some point, and this is when in the practical world you have to ask yourself, I need to get this out into service for the societal good. And research should continue. And this is where governments that are proactive in funding research grow much better. I mean, Europe is huge into getting new technologies, Canada has now, over the last few years, we have seen a lot of growth in getting companies to come to Canada to start their setup. But, and that's the Canada today. But Canada a few years ago was probably, waiting and watching. But now we have Google, smart cities coming up. So it's very exciting time. Transit, in 2000, from 2007 to 2014, we were just buying new vehicles on the existing tracks. But then came the boom, and now we are building new infrastructure. And that's why we see, a lot of projects on the go where there was no infrastructure before. So as engineers, you always struggle. You want to make it better, but at some point you say, this will benefit. And that's why it's important to have the business case. Because what the business case does is it makes those demarcations. Have you reached your intent? So it's like a goal, it's a goal setting. Once you reach that goal, you need to get it up. but, you know, the desire to do better can always continue with research. Yeah.
I have kind of a specific question. So I noticed a lot of the new RT lines coming up across the country, they're all using low flow. Why, do you know why most agencies are preferring low flow versus the traditional high flow?
So the big advantage is accessibility. When you go so much more higher, it's just a challenge to get an accessible, and that's something, I know I had it in somewhere in my presentation, but what we are also trying to do as government and transit agencies are, we want to make transit equitable to everybody. And so what are the systems you want to bring into place so that we can meet that need? I mean, imagine a slope that you need to build from high up here to from there. It's much easier. The systems work much better. And that was some of the challenges that Toronto TTC old cars would, you know, they wouldn't be able to meet. So accessibility is huge. It is a technology that has been tried, tested in European countries, and you're just trying to bring that forward. So that's one of the reasons. Sounds good. Any other? Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to make it as non-technical as possible, but I think I did go a lot technical. So.
You know the schedule?
And Eglinton's the new LRT project in Toronto, or?
It's happening for the last 6 years. Yeah. Right now, the stage that we are in is we are doing testing commissioning, and we need to put it in service. So this is where my focus has been, is to get safety certification in place. That's what keeps me up.
So it's in the commissioning stage now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does Metrolinx, so are you guys like the overall agency that like oversees like TTC and everything, or how does it work?
So what happened is, TTC was a separate body.
Yeah.
Metrolinx was, and we had Go Transit, right? So Go Transit at some point, and we would try to get money from the government. And our government is the Ministry of Transportation
In Ontario.
in Ontario. So Ontario Ministry of Transportation. And so Metrolinx was like a body that was created in between who will help us get the funding. So we were more of a, you know, liaison that I want funding to get the project going. And then we would distribute it to either Go Transit or TTC. So Go Transit just seamlessly kind of became Metrolinx, and then the Up Express project was part of this Metrolinx, and then we had Presto, because we wanted to automate the systems. I mean, Singapore has had those systems from moons ago, but we did not have those kind of automated systems. We had cash.
That's a payment system?
Yeah, the payment system. So Metrolinx took that initiative to develop that. And so Metrolinx now had these 3 arms that they were working on. TTC is still autonomous because TTC is like Waterloo Transit. It is a municipal body. It is under the municipal body. But Metrolinx now became a provincial body. And so So we became more funding partners, and we fund the projects. And projects like TTC, even Eglinton LRT runs in Toronto. But but we are the funding partners. We are the owners.
You're the owners.
And now what we are doing is we are working in partnership with TTC so that they can be our operators. So it's just kind of the way you slice it and dice it,
Okay.
to make sure everybody is kind of taken care of.
So does the Eglinton line, does that integrate with anything existing, with the streetcar or the metro?
Oh yeah. If you go to the Eglinton, it cuts across GO Transit, 3 GO Transit lines,
Okay.
I think 2 or 3 GO Transit lines, Union Pearson
Yeah.
and TTC. So we are trying to build interconnectivity
Yeah.
between systems.
But it's,
Even-
sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
But it's not like an extension of an exit, like it's not like a new line for the streetcar or new line for subway, it's like a separate system, right?
So Subway is TTC.
Yeah.
Eglinton is a new line. It's almost like a streetcar,
Okay.
but owned by Metrolinx.
Okay.
While TTC streetcars are owned by TTC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we right now Metrolinx is really working with different partners, because you have just so much pool of people, and what you want to do is you want to use their expertise to build a larger system. If we keep fighting among ourselves to take the same share of the pie, you will have duplication of engineers here, you have a duplication of engineers there. What we are trying to do is make it seamless. Have engineers, have operators, have maintainers, contractors. I mean, right now the market is so hot because Calgary is having transit lines. Vancouver is building new lines. And Toronto, I mean, if you see, just under the Metrolinx belt, we have Ontario line come up. We have 3 rapid transits, Eglinton, Euro-Ontario, Finch West, Hamilton has come back. So, and then we have another one where we are doing a feasibility study. Remember when I talked about the feasibility study? We are doing for Eglinton Crosstown, Eglinton Crosstown West. So that will connect from the existing Eglinton to airport. And then you have Union Pearson Express also that's doing that. So lots of travel, and consulting organizations are complaining because they don't find people. So engineers are a good place to be. Engineering is a good place to be. The market has been so hot. I have been trying to search for a safety engineer who can help me with my safety. None of the contracting companies are able to provide me a safety engineer. The market is so hot, so the future looks bright. And especially with these new technologies that you're all, and you will be developing these technologies. We are done. Our times are done. So, one day when I'm sitting in a rocking chair, I'll see you guys on television making hyperlooped, what it is. Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
How did you get into this industry? Like, where did you start?
Yeah, I had my first slide, but I know I jumped to it. And this is something, where everybody struggles with. So I'm an electrical engineer. I started my career with electrical substations, power generation, high voltage, and then, and this is like, and you will guess my age with that. Email was a concept. I remember in my first year, I did a presentation on email. Okay, cellular telephony was a concept. I mean, it was getting built. I mean, mean, somewhere in the world it was, but it was still a concept. So, and then when I graduated, I went into, of course, high power substations design and so on. And then I got an opportunity to work with SCADA systems. And this is supervisory control and data acquisition system, do you know? So anyway, it's a very interesting topic. So what, I shouldn't get into that, but what it does is, you take all the systems and you have a transit control center or a load dispatch center, which is using this thing and controlling. So you're able to control all what's happening in the field right from the desk. So that's supervisory, so it's supervisory control data acquisition system. And so I got an opportunity to work on that for the power generation company that I was, I as a consultant I would be going to. So I jumped on that opportunity. From there, from SCADA, I got into, and fiber optics was a new thing. So I went into fiber optics, I went into microwave. So at that time, I remember 2.4 gigahertz frequency was like big. It was like, wow, we can do microwave. Of course, when you do microwave systems, it's like the higher you go in frequency, it's more direct. So for the same power generation company, what I did was, we as engineering, we installed a microwave system because they had hydro stations, hydro generating, so power generation through hydro. And whenever you have like lakes high up in the mountains and you're using gravity to run the turbine down, so you wanted some kind of a communication system there. So that's what I did. So when I did that, so I got into systems. Now if you see, my progression went from high voltage to systems. And once I went there, I joined Toronto Transit. And in Toronto Transit, I was working in tunnels, and they have emergency trip systems. So if you know emergency trip systems, and you will see the blue light in the tunnels, that's a safety feature. That's, again, in the back, it's run by SCADA system. So, and then the whole transit control center, and then I was with TT, and then I got an opportunity with the subway rocket. So that was a design of an entire new vehicle, absolutely different, right? It was very exciting. Did that, and then I migrated, I moved to Up Express, Union Pearson Express. Now, if you see, so I went from an electrical vehicle, train, to a diesel train. But concepts are always the same. So, and somewhere in my presentation I was going to say, if you think that, and it's evolving and you will get outdated, you will never get outdated, because the engineering concepts always remain the same, no matter where you go. I mean, you're using maglev. Maglev is what? It's magnetic technology. You just enhance, you continue to enhance, but you'll never get old-fashioned with engineering. Concepts always remain the same. And then, so from subway rocket, I went to the Union Pearson, and then once I completed the Union Pearson, I did a few projects in terms of governance management, governance framework, because at that time, and like I said, funding started coming in from 2012, 2014. We started realizing we are getting bigger projects, like with multiple stakeholders. And as engineers, you will get it's so complicated managing stakeholders that as you progress in your career, that's what you will have to manage. How do you manage stakeholders and continue to have them on your side? That will be the key. So once you get into that managing stakeholders, but your foundation of engineering should never be lost. Because the minute you lose that, you have lost the edge over others. You're no different from others. So always keep your technical edge 100%. how much ever, you go and you are managing stakeholders, because when you have facts with you, no one can argue. No one can argue against you. And you will have lots of arguments, you will have a lot of discussions. In our terms, we always say you will have a lot of discussions. You will have to get agreements from different parties. Competing interests, they are all party to all those things. So, and that's how I kind of, and then, and that's where, even while I'm working as a director of systems, and I have to deal with more of managerial and, managing partners, getting it delivered, and then I have a whole staff that works for engineering related issues. I always keep a tab on engineering. And I would always recommend engineers to do that. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
You're also the chair of the Women in Engineering chapter in Mississauga, right?
Yes, I was last year.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would you say about that experience? Or like what?
So yeah, so PEO has taken an initiative, and that's slightly different from your question, but I'll just answer to that. So what PEO is saying is by 2030, I want 30% of women in engineering roles in companies with employers. So one of the big push that I'm really, and it's to my heart, is pushing for employers to be part of that discussion, to encourage or at least give an opportunity to women engineers to join their companies. We are not asking for privilege. We are asking for a fair position on the table. That's all we are asking for. I'm completely, for having a fair seat on the table, rather than we getting it out of privilege. So that's something that I'm working towards. And so in regards to women in engineering, it's things are changing. And it was funny because while I was standing there as a jury member, I was the only woman.
Yeah, I know.
Out of, I think, 7, 8, 9. I know there was one more lady, Fatima, I think she was also there. So, but then you don't see that. You don't, and why do we call it 30 by 30? So, when you have 30% of similar type people, then you're heard. Otherwise, you will not be heard. So that's what we are trying to strive towards. As women engineers, we always have, it's sometimes, there is a lot of companies, and especially Metrolinx. Metrolinx is really pushing forward to getting women on the table. And they haven't been successful in that. So, but let me tell you, life is always tough, and never lose hope. I think that is one thing you can take from me, is never lose hope. Keep doing what you're doing. You will get it. And not everybody always gets a fair chance anyway, right? There are so many times you wouldn't review all the resumes, so it's just not luck. And you may be one of those. So just keep what you're doing, be consistent at it, and it'll get you. Yeah. Thank you.
the vehicle machine was, the vehicle hit, yes, yeah, we were getting pushed that like, sometimes we'll do the test and we'll keep it in like a binder, like, oh, we're gonna upload because they were doing it.
Yes, yes. And after static comes dynamic.
Yes, dynamic, and they also, they have the viewpoints that they have
Hello. Yeah. Yeah, we have automatic train control even on our LRVs. Yeah.
So, for example, that's
It's
the Palace?
oh no, no, sorry, mine is Bombardier's AME. Euro Ontario has Palace. But you know what, that I can signal it. Do you want to do this one?
I remember during my
That's someplace.
Oh, you were the key. I don't know if I need to be elsewhere, like just ask.
I mean, what I've seen is most of the people that we hire are usually signaling electrical. And,
You guys always I feel like you're a freshman for second row kind of person. You're like center mid back.
Okay.
You're testing, you see all the systems.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, so that is the best thing. I always tell, I've not showed up on students as well. Trying to get into testing and commissioning, it's hard, laborious job.
It's hard labor, it is, yeah.
It is.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a mechanic myself, but yeah, because the thing is, as Siemens, we're like the integrator, so it's like, if it's like a vendor, like Wabtec or Hub, they have a problem, it's our problem too. So I have to like sit there and think like,
I mean, even when I get some vendor document, we don't agree, we don't approve it, because we say, you as a
You're
contractor.
assuming that I come to class.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm assuming if you come to class, if it's a big if.
I went to zero.
I know.
welcome to the team.
Yeah, they wanted me to be on the electrical.
Are you gonna do this?
I know everything needs to know. They wanted me to go for the stuff for
Honestly, so they need like how road estimates and kind of communicate to the CAN, right? So
we need to do that too, yeah. Why they need it? Too late. It makes sense, I just.
Can you hear me? Is that okay?
yeah.
Okay. Shall we start or shall we record this moment? Okay, let's start. Good afternoon. My name is Chanupon. This is Curtis. We are researchers from the MacLab Microbiology Laboratory. For today, in this workshop, we're going to present about our research activity in the MacLab lab. First question about MacLab. Besides the MacLab train that you may know, you know that there are any other applications of the magnetic levitation technology? Have some idea about it?
I guess like industrial applications, like
Yeah.
moving things around warehouses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why the objective of today is that we're going to present more application of the magnetic technology. So the presentation will be separated into two parts. The first part is about the introduction of the MacLab lab and some research activity project that we do in the lab. The second part, there will be the project that Curtis and I are working on right now. It's called the magnetic levitation floor. which is installed in the robot. Yeah, then let's start from. Okay, about the method it's established in 2004 by Professor Kamisi. He is the director of the Magnet Lab and professor in the Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering Department. Our lab location this floor on the other side of this building, and mostly most of our research focus on the magnetic radiation for the robot and some other research on the electromagnetic and the mechatronic system. And we have support from external and internal. Also, we have the collaborator from internal, like RoboHub, the multi-scale additive manufacturing laboratory or MSAM, and we have some external collaborators. Yeah. So for the next session, it will be about the research activities in the Magnet Lab. Okay. Hey. Okay. So for today, we would like to present our 6 research projects that we working on in the lab. Starting from the first project that done by the lab is about the magnetically limited micro robot, followed by the micro actuator, and we have some application of using the magnetic field to control the magnetic particle for the air passing. And for these two research work is about the additive manufacturing. First, we use the magnet system to levitate the platform as a base for the 3D printing, and we use the eddy current technique to inspect the part that's made from the 3D print about the defect inside. And the last part, which will be the second part of this presentation, is about the planar magnet platform. So we will start from the first project. It's about a magnetically limited micro robot, which is the first project that has been done in the Magnet Lab here. The purpose of this project is that we want to levitate a tiny magnetic object or the MEMS robot that can be manipulated by the magnetic field. The next work of this platform that we can use, it can work collaboratively with another robot. The benefit of this kind of system is that you don't need to get inside the hazardous area. You can manipulate it from anywhere. And the last application of this is that it can deliver the tiny robot inside the human body for surgery or and you can see here we have the small capsule here that can be controlled inside the human body. Yep. And we have another development of the micro manipulation. From the previous platform, we have the electromagnet installed on the top to control the magnet or micro robot, which is limited at the bottom. In this case, instead of we have the magnet on the top, we rearrange it into the hemisphere and control the small magnet with the high accuracy. With this, we can navigate the robot with the accuracy of the 13 micron. The same for this system that we developed for the minimally invasive surgery that will reduce the recovery time for the patients. The next one is about the micro manipulator. In this project, we use it inspired from the spherical robot, but okay, if you don't take a look at this rod first, you can see that we have 4 electromagnets here to control the magnet object here that can be rotated at any angle. With this, we have some extension rod here that can be manipulated, and we can attach some end effector at the end to perform any task that we want, that it can be interchangeable. Yeah. The next one is that we apply to use the magnetic field to control the particle for the abrasion. Inside, you can see here, sorry that it is quite small here, but if you have a kind of the workpiece like a tube, but you want to make the internal surface to be smooth, with the normal abrasive technology, it's quite hard to make a particle go inside. But with this, you can just put the magnetic particle inside and control by using the magnetic field outside that can move around, and you can see that the magnetic field is rotating. We also have some project that we work collaboratively with the MSAM lab. First is about magnet for the additive manufacturing. With this, instead of using the 3D state to control the base for the 3D pin, we use the magnet system to levitate the base. Work collaboratively with the 3D printer. With this, the disc that we have seen here is not a magnet, it's just the aluminum sheet. By using the eddy current principle, we can levitate this sheet above the coil like 2 or 3 centimeters and use it as a base by adjusting the frequency of the current that we supply to the coil. Yeah.
Why would you want to suspend it? I'm not sure if I quite understand the purpose of suspending the plate.
Oh, but for this one, so normally if you use the 3D printer, you use the 3D state to control that.
Yep.
Yeah, but in this case, for example, we want to use this as a part of the 3D thing.
To build it off of.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at the end, you don't need to remove it from the plate, just take it out.
So would that limit the part to having to always be in the form of a disc as a base plate?
Yeah.
In any case?
Oh, it can be anything. It doesn't need to be this kind of thing.
So then beforehand you would have to machine the shape of the part to then
Yeah.
print on the part.
So are you building a part with this? Like the disc is part of the design?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Is it limited to only a disc, or can you machine any part you want before putting it on the surface and then levitating it with maglev to then print afterwards?
Yeah, that's what we explain. But right now we just on the disc first.
Okay, but it's not limited to just the disc. It could be any part. You just have to machine it beforehand, and then before. Okay.
Yeah, that would be.
This was out.
Yeah, so at the end you don't need to remove the disc out from the part. It
Yeah.
can be the part of the final product.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that the main point where you reduce like post manufacturing
Yeah.
like machining
Yeah.
going on afterwards?
Yeah.
It's primarily due to not having to remove from the base plate,
Yeah.
which is okay.
Yeah. Can we?
Does
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, does it also mean you can only print in like ferrous metals or non-ferrous metals? Like, are you limited in that aspect? Like, you can only print metals that don't have any magnetic properties?
Yeah, actually it's accessible on the metal, like aluminum, titanium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we need to produce any current on this sheet.
Right.
That's why it must be non-magnetic metal.
Okay, so that does have to be okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Hold on.
Yeah, sure.
I noticed that this is like an FDM printer, not an SLA printer. Is there any reason like this this SLA printer for metals? I'm not sure if you're familiar, like these powder layers.
Yeah, how do you?
Yeah. Is there there any reason why we wouldn't just use that instead of just magnetizing and using FDM printer?
This is we want to extend our concept.
Oh, it's a concept. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not we actually I didn't work on this work, but so far as I know, they're gonna integrate this magnet system into the 3D printing soon.
So like with FDM, or like powder bed fusion, electron beam melting, like those type of printers as well.
Yeah, I was just curious because I know SLA can probably do this, but do you think it might be cheaper to do it this way instead?
Actually, it's not that it's cheap or expensive. We just try to see that
See what it's for.
Yeah,
Okay.
then we can find some proper application in the future.
Okay.
We do research for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Yep.
Prove the concept.
So, I have a question about the stability. Is it dynamically stable, or is it like a static stability when you're doing this magnet kind of system?
You mean the representation level?
Yeah, the disc itself, is it like stable through electrodynamic suspension, or is it just stable by itself, static?
Right now, it's by itself, but you can adjust the height. Because from here, we send the alternating current to the coil. Then if you adjust the frequency, the representation height it will be adjusted as well.
Right, but then that would also cause the disc to spin, right?
Sorry, could you please say it again? Sorry for that.
So this from the sound of it, the way it's controlled, it sounds like it's a electrodynamic suspension, is it?
For now it's an open loop control.
Sorry?
For now it's an open loop control.
Oh, it's an open loop.
Yeah, for now it's open loop. Yeah, but soon we will do the closed loop. Yeah, we just test the concept first.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Any question? Any question? Okay, then we go to the next. So this part is about the defect detection. From this, we also use the concept of eddy current principle to detect the bubble inside the part. In this case, we also need to work on the non-magnetic metal as well. From this, we work on the stainless steel and titanium with some small scratch at the bottom of the surface. Yeah. From this, we can read the magnetic field. We can actually we read the voltage drop from across the surface, and then we can check based on that to see that where is the crack or bubble inside the product. Okay. Then actually this is the end of part 1. Then the next part is about the magnetic representation flow. Curtis will present that part. Could you go to the next one? Yeah. Before we go to the second part, do you have any more questions?
What do you know what feature, like down what feature size you can detect deformations or cracks? Like, is it like 2 millimeters or 0.1 millimeters is your limit to detect deformations?
From that, right? Actually, we use we compare with the data. We actually we made the scratch with the known dimension, and then we have some experiment to read the voltage first.
So it just gives you a defect signal, but it doesn't indicate any like the actual, for example, if it was 80% porosity in certain areas versus 100% porosity. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, then I will switch to continue.
So yeah, a lot of those questions we actually don't have the best details on because this is the project we're working on. The other projects are other members of the lab.
Oh, okay, so this is where we would be.
This is where our experience is.
Okay.
But yeah, so this last project we call the magnetic levitation floor, MAG4 for short as well. So basically the principle behind this is, for example, in a maglev train, it can only really go long distance in one axis, forward and back, right? The train's not meant to go side to side or doing crazy motions. Whereas with a planar motor like this, so a maglev planar motor as we call it, basically you have coils arranged in a plane. And this plane can extend virtually any dimension. Like you can just add more and more coils to make it as long as you want, whatever shape you want. And then whatever you're levitating on top of it can move basically unlimited in the horizontal direction, so x and y, and also rotation about yaw. So you have kind of 3 axes of theoretically unlimited motion. And then because you're levitating as well, you do have kind of small range of motion in the other 3 axes. So in, for example, levitation height, the gap, and then pitch and roll. You have those 2 rotations, you have some small control over that as well. So it is a 6-degree of freedom system. And you have 3 degrees that can go a very, very long range. And so the advantage of this is mainly in industrial applications. So it can replace, for example, conveyor systems or for flexible manufacturing. So we have kind of manufacturing lines that are very quickly changing, or like you're changing your products often. Very kind of high precision tasks as well. This helps with a lot. So this is still in the kind of more concept stage. Maglev platforms like this though are already used in photolithography. So for printing like circuit boards, like CPUs and GPUs, that kind of stuff. So you talk about like the nanoscale processes from like AMD and Intel. They typically use photolithography to do that. And so that's levitating the workpiece above a system like this. So that's how they get that really precise nanoscale precision. So with levitation, you can kind of counteract any vibrations in the room or anything like that. So when we're trying to get to the nanoscale, it's really important to do that actually. Like even just natural vibrations in a building will screw up at that scale. Yes, let's go to the next slide. So this magnetic levitation floor, this project is in collaboration with RoboHub. So the RoboHub is kind of a big room downstairs. It's on the first floor of E7. You'll see some big glass walls around it. It says RoboHub on the side, I think. So basically inside this, we do have a kind of large-scale maglev floor system that we're constructing and testing with. Right now, you can't see it. It's actually in a pit. So we have it not on a lift that can raise and lower. So it's actually below the floor right now. But we can take the floor panels off and raise it up and use it. So that's kind of another advantage of the system, is that you can store it pretty easily. But yeah, this is with Professor Kamesi. He's our supervisor. He's one of the principal investigators of the RoboHub, and then this project is one of the major projects in that RoboHub as well. It's kind of a very large project, required a lot of funding to get going. So a lot of the funding came from the Canadian Foundation of Innovation, so CFI. Yeah.
Is it possible to get a demonstration this weekend of the maglev?
No, sorry. Yeah, we're actually it's still technically under construction. We're very close to being done, but not quite done. Just a few more steps to make. But we do have like prototype systems that are working in our lab. So yeah, to go to the next slide. This is one preliminary prototype we had. It was back in 2018 actually. So Cha was part of this. So we called it the MAG table. So basically on this, there's electromagnetic coils below the surface of that table. So it's an aluminum sheet there you can see. I think we actually might have one of the sheets there. We'll demonstrate something afterwards. But there's basically an array of coils below that. I think there's 70 of them. And then we're levitating a disc magnet. So that carrier there, the thing that's levitating we call a carrier. So the idea is that eventually there'll be like a workpiece on top of it. But yeah, so the carrier has one, I think that's a 3-inch disc magnet. Right?
Yeah, for that one, it's a 2-inch magnet. 2-inch disc magnet.
Okay. So yeah, it's just a disc magnet underneath that carrier, and it's levitating that. So with the disc magnet, it's axisymmetric. So like if you rotate it around the yaw axis, it looks the same, like the magnetic field is the same. So with the disc magnet, you can actually only control 5 degrees of freedom. That rotation is uncontrollable. But you can get that 5 degrees of freedom basically by having there'll be a set of coils below it that are activated. So you can imagine that there's maybe 10 coils below this that are powered on, contributing to levitation. And so by varying the currents in those coils, so these are DC power going into these. By varying the current in those coils and the direction, you can control those 5 degrees of freedom. So it is technically over-actuated. So kind of trying to determine the current map in the coils is a kind of difficult research area. You can optimize for many different things. So to get the exact same force and torques on the carrier, there's actually multiple solutions. So like one of those would minimize, for example, power going into the system. Some might minimize maximum current. Others would do other things. There's multiple ways of going about it. Yeah, so this system, because it's repulsive levitation, you're levitating above the coils. Basically, it's inherently unstable. So you need a closed loop system in order to keep it steady. So we have constant feedback control. So the feedback comes from a motion tracking camera system. So you can see on the carrier there's reflective markers. So these markers reflect infrared light. So you have a Vicon camera motion tracking system we have kind of set up around this. So those cameras have infrared projectors on them, and then they reflect off these markers and get received into the camera. And then basically by having those 4 cameras, you do some kind of calibration. You can determine the 3D positions and orientation of the carrier. And the cameras can actually track multiple objects at a time. So they operate pretty fast, actually. That's one of the advantages of using this type of system. Our cameras run at 1,000 hertz, 1,000 frames per second. They have precision of about 0.02 millimeters. So like 20 microns it can detect. So very accurate camera system. Very, very good. So basically from that camera system we get feedback into our PLC, and then 1,000 times a second it's calculating the currents assigned to the coils, and then that can maintain levitation. So if you go to the next slide here. Oh yeah, sorry.
Do you guys, during your, I guess, technological progression, have you discovered like the potential limit in the part you could hold up, like in terms of weight?
So the weight actually depends on many things. So it depends on like the size of the magnets, the material of the magnets, the arrangement of them, all that kind of stuff. So this magnet actually, one of the advantages of it, this carrier, is that it's just a single magnet with an acrylic frame on top. So you think of like the total mass to the mass of the magnet ratio, for example, is very high. So this thing can levitate quite far off of the table. I think it's like over an inch from the table or something like that. So other systems, you have like more magnets or weaker magnets, they can't levitate quite as high, but maybe your total carrying capacity can increase even. Because if you have like a heavier system, the weight of any object you put on top of it is less compared to the total weight, that ratio. But the actual rotation height may be smaller. So it does depend on many factors. It's kind of a research area. Yeah.
So those are aluminum plates that you're mostly focused on, I'm guessing? Is like 6061, I'm guessing?
So the magnet itself is neodymium magnet. I think it's N52 or something. The aluminum plates below it, so there's coils below the plate, and the aluminum there actually isn't necessary, you can remove it.
Okay.
But the reason for having a thin aluminum sheet above the coils is to provide a little bit of eddy current damping. So as the carrier is moving around, there'll be eddy currents produced in that sheet that will kind of act against the motion of the carrier. So that adds a little bit of damping to the system and increases the stability. So without the sheet, actually it's more responsive and faster, but it's a little less stable, it's harder to control. So you have a thin sheet, it's uniform, right? So it's the same thickness everywhere across the table, and that allows it to have a little bit more stability. So all the coils are ironless coils, so they're hollow. So the coils have a square aluminum channel that's hollow inside them. So by having no core, essentially it allows it to switch faster. So the coils can change their current and direction. The magnetic field can respond faster. So the system is very responsive. It's very fast. So you have almost instant directional change with this compared to like a traditional conveyor system or something like that. Let's go to the next slide.
So it's experiment about the single magnet.
Yeah. So this I think is from 2018. So this is it, just kind of rotating up and down. you can see that axis of motion, and then it's kind of getting steady at this height. And then after that, it'll start tilting. So it's tilting in both directions, and then you can do the other axis as well.
And that's your only 5 degrees of freedom limit in terms of your yaw currently?
Yeah, so right now the yaw is what's naturally having some oscillation. So the yaw is uncontrollable because of the disc magnet, but the pitch and roll have some rotation. I mean, they can't rotate forever, obviously, because it can only rotate a certain distance from the table.
Right.
So you can't flip it a full 360 because it'll be too far.
Is there potential for that?
There are some research groups that have kind of interesting carrier designs. So carriers, for example, are like spherical.
Right.
The magnets are on different sides, and so as it moves, it's like activating different magnets. And so you can do something like that. But then, if it's like a sphere, for example, you can't really work on it, right? Like so it is kind of different applications, but it is possible to do something like that. Yeah, so this one rotates like up to a couple of centimeters, 2-3 centimeters from the table. But yeah, you can see that the rotation is uncontrolled. So as you start getting this side-to-side motion, it does start to just naturally rotate. The camera can still pick it up and you can determine it's still positioned correctly, but the system can't stop that rotation. There's nothing to do. So if you go to the next slide, basically this carrier has 3 magnets. They're still disc magnets, but now there's 3 of them arranged in a triangular pattern. So by adding more magnets now, you can control that rotation. So this is a 6 degree of freedom levitation. So this system can still rotate quite high. It's also just an acrylic frame, I think, on the magnets there. But now you can get all 6 axes that you can control. So there's this pitch. And then here's the so this was a kind of rough limitation from a couple years ago. So it's kind of a coarse magnetic field estimate, and it's just using simple PID controls on each axis. So it does have some disturbance and shaking. It's not can improve upon it quite a bit. But you can see the concept basically demonstrated. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So the magnetic levitation for the platform. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry, just had a question. So the table is made out of like an array of coils, but do you guys know like the force of like an individual coil? Like what max force you guys can draw?
Maximum force. So there are 2 different systems. The mag table and this system, you have different sizes of coils. So it does depend on that. I know for our newer system, our carrier itself is about 6 kilograms. We'll show later on. And we activate it with about 25 coils that lift it. But even though there's 25 coils activated, only like a handful of them are doing most of the contribution. The rest of them are more for stability, but there's really only probably like 4 coils that are doing most of the work. So if you look at the current map, it's not a uniform current throughout all the coils, right? It's very different. So basically, some coils are in a better position compared to the magnet than others. So they can contribute more. But in terms of the force, I guess if you did like 120, 130 newtons over 4, I guess, probably kind of around that. So yeah, about 30, 40 newtons probably per coil at maximum. But it does depend on many things, right? It depends on depends on the current going in the coil, depends on the size of the coil, depends on the magnet, distance of the magnet from the coil, all these different things, right? The size of the magnets, the material, all that stuff. So the force is dependent on many factors. It's not constant.
Okay. Yeah, and I did have 2 follow-ups on that, if that's okay. So in terms of like the currents through the coils, like for example, the levitation floor, like what's the current rating for the coils?
Yeah, so these coils that we're using on our new system are 3-inch diameter, about 3 inches tall, and they have 10 amp maximum.
10 amp?
10 amps, yeah, either direction.
Okay, and yeah, also wanted to ask the general effects. So, like, are the like forces generated from the coils like proportional to how many are in the array, or are they like non-linear in that like respect?
So when you have a carrier be activating a bunch of coils in the vicinity. So if you're activating more coils like further away from the carrier, they'll have a smaller contribution because the distance isn't big, right? So like only the coils close to it can actually do a whole lot. Like as you get a certain distance away, they're kind of negligible effect, right? Because the magnetic field basically decays exponentially with distance. So the coils directly below it do the most work. It does depend on, like for example, our fallback array we'll talk about later on. The magnets in that array are oriented in different directions. So some of the magnets are magnetized vertically, some of them are magnetized horizontally, stuff like that. So if you have a coil directly below a magnet that's horizontally magnetized, it can't really levitate it very easily. That's more for getting the side-to-side motion strong. So it does depend on all those kinds of things.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so this magnet levitation floor is kind of a new project that's going on in RoboHub. So the construction started in 2020, I believe. Getting close to done now. But basically, it's one of the largest levitation systems of this kind of design in all of North America, actually, or even the world, I guess. Most platforms that do this are small scale for kind of nanoscale precision stuff. So large scale conveying tasks are a new area that hasn't really been investigated a whole lot. So this platform will be the first of its kind once it's done. It's about 6 feet by 8 feet. There's close to 800 coils in it. It's 32 by 24, I believe, in the array. And yeah, this concept design started a while ago. So basically, there's multiple stages of designing a system like this. And the concept design, you're thinking about things like what coils to choose, like different shapes. So these are square coils. You could use cylindrical coils, you could use rectangular coils. It doesn't have to be coil design as well. You can use PCBs, and then within the PCB you have basically lines of wire inside them that can be so you get like a kind of linear coil pattern with two different directions in the layers. So it's multiple designs like that. So kind of choosing how you want to set up with that, different carrier designs, how you're going to actuate them, the sizes of the coils, all that kind of stuff, right? So there's many different things to consider. We end up going with square coils. The reason for that is because they're symmetric. So like a rectangular coil, when your performance along one direction will not be the same along the other. Whereas with a square coil, it's uniform, either direction, doesn't matter. And then square coils versus cylindrical coils, we're planning to arrange them in this kind of grid-like pattern. It doesn't have to be like this. You could kind of offset the rows and stuff and put them in like a honeycomb pattern or something. But we want to do this kind of grid-like pattern. It makes it simpler to work with. And so with that pattern, square coils have a higher density of magnetic field than circular coils. So with circular coils, you could offset the rows and then put them closer together. But if you arrange them like this, it's not as effective. And then because we have this kind of coil design where they're like 3 inches tall, they are quite strong. So if you're to use like a PCB approach, you have higher, more accurate manufacturing tolerances within the PCB. So your model matches close to what's actually built. But because PCBs have limited thickness, it can't get quite as strong. So with a system like this, we have many tall coils. You can get a lot of strength in the magnetic field that way. It's just a little harder to control because the coils don't match the model quite as well. They're not perfectly shaped. They're not perfect squares and stuff. Right? But yeah, so then after the design, use like analysis. Analysis, for example, can be kind of magnetic field simulations and ANSYS Maxwell. You can estimate like different coil shapes and designs and figure out what to optimize your magnetic field strength and stuff like that. That kind of goes hand in hand with the carrier levitating. And then also, like obviously, this whole system weighs quite a bit, so it's supporting it all, the structure design, so the frame design below that, you can create a simulation on that. So do stretches, all that stuff, stress analysis. Yeah, the construction's been going on for about 2 years now, almost done. And then after that, we'll get going. Let's go to the next slide. So in part of this design, We want it to be kind of a large scale system, so we want to make it modular. So this design is kind of modular stators. So basically you have 8 coils on an aluminum frame, and so this is kind of the modular aspect. So you can just arrange these frames in whatever pattern you want. So we have, I believe, 24 of them in that direction, and then you have kind of 4 rows the other way of these. So it ends up being 32 by 24 coils in total. Basically, this is a kind of modular design where you can just arrange as many coil modules as you want side by side. So all the wires just go directly down below the coils, and then this is an aluminum frame, so it doesn't interfere with the magnetic field. And then below this, there's kind of a steel frame there that you can see. And that's where all the electronics are. So that's where the system is powered with all the amplifiers and our distribution, all that stuff. And then we have thermocouples embedded throughout this as well. Not in every coil, but kind of throughout the system, so you can estimate with the temperature of all the coils and figure out like optimization in that sense. So certain coils are, for example, overheating. You can actually just switch it up and change your optimization methods so you're utilizing better coils. Because it is an overactuated system, so you don't need to always be putting most of the power in the same coils. But it is an option. Oh yeah, also it's on a lift. So you can raise and lower into the floor. But yeah, so with this system, our feedback is provided by the Vicon motion tracking system. So in RoboHub, you'll notice if the glass is see-through that there's cameras basically along the walls and on the ceilings. I think there's 12 cameras in total right now. I think there's 8 on the wall, 4 on the ceiling. And then during the rotation, we're actually bringing another 4 of them like tripods as well, just around the system. But with this camera system, it's used for many different projects in RoboHub, not just our project. So, for example, the different robot groups and the drones and stuff, they also use this Vicon system for providing feedback. But yeah, for our system, we use it as well. And then, because this platform is so big and versatile, we can rotate multiple carriers and types of carriers. It doesn't matter. It's very, very generic planar motor design. So some designs are just made specifically with their coil arrangements and pattern, PCB pattern, for example, work with very specific carriers. Whereas if it's just square coil pattern, you can use it for basically anything. It's very generic. Yeah, so the disc magnets you saw, the Hallback array we'll show in the next slide. So Hallback array, or Hallback array, is basically you have magnets that are in the carrier arranged in different orientations. So, for example, the first magnet might be like arranged north-south vertically, so like south on the bottom. Then the next magnet would be horizontally oriented, and then after that it would flip. So now the first one was like south on the bottom, next one would be like half a period later would be north on the bottom, south on the top. So it's like a periodic rotation. So because of that periodic orientation of magnets, I'll just finish this. Because of that periodic rotation of the magnets, if you were to draw like a line of magnetic field below the array, it approximates like a sine wave. So that makes it easy to estimate the magnetic field of the carrier by doing that. And also with the Hallback array design, it kind of concentrates the magnetic field toward the bottom of the carrier, and then it's kind of increasing your load carrying capacity as well. So I'll show that next slide. What was your question?
What are the pros and cons of having a single versus multiple disc magnets?
On one carrier or just like in total? The idea of the system is that you can have multiple
one carrier.
So on one carrier, as I mentioned before, like with a single magnet, if it's a disc magnet, it's axisymmetric. So that means you can't control the rotation around the axis. So if you want to like do any work on it, if the thing starts spinning and you can't stop it, it's very difficult to work with, right? So like a single disc magnet is more just for demonstration purposes. It's not really meant for actual final working purposes. So you have multiple magnets, and that adds you control over that axis.
So you're gonna have multiple disc magnets stacked on each other?
So not stacked, they're like side by side.
Okay.
So you have like the one we showed earlier had 3 arranged like a triangle pattern. So because of that, basically, you can imagine that it's no longer axis measured.
Yeah.
So then it can actually close it and rotate. And the holdback array as well, it's a 2D holdback array that we use, and that also can control rotation. Any other questions before we move? Okay, that's good, nice slide. So this is a prototype of the megalith floor that I showed in the previous slides. This is like an 8x8 coil array we have in our lab. We're levitating that 2D holdback array that I mentioned. So this carrier is 13 by 13 inches and weighs about 6 kilograms. Has like a aluminum frame on the top to support it. And there are quite a bit of forces that come from this holdback array. So the frame has like some ribs to counteract the stresses. There's some like forces from the magnet array that try and make it work out, essentially. So with this system now, we can, this video is kind of showing different motions you can do on the system. So it's, in the first kind of start of the video, is doing step motions. So you can see the responsiveness is very fast. You can change direction very quickly. It's quite steady. So here's like a step in vertical direction, so a Z step. These are step responses. So it looks kind of jerky because basically our target is just jumping. We want to target this position, we jump to that position. So right when you send the target, it just moves. So you can see it moves quite quickly. I think it's like in 0.1 or 0.2 seconds. There's some of the small steps that can just move there. And then this is kind of a more smooth motion. So the long stroke application is just a square pattern. We can rotate as well. Our current model can't handle rotations infinitely, but the platform can. We just need to improve the code. When you model it so that the carrier is in a certain orientation, you can simplify the problem, so you can make your computation faster. So that's kind of what we've done here. Yeah?
How precise is the motion?
How precise?
Yeah.
So the precision of the motion is actually limited by your measuring system. So our camera system, the Nikon cameras, can measure about to 0.02 millimeters. It's like 20 microns about. And so you can rotate to that precision, basically. We're using a more advanced measuring system. Like we have some laser sensors in the lab. We're going to be doing a rotation with those sensors afterwards pretty soon. So those can sense to finer precision. So they can sense, like, for example, 1 micron or even less than that. And so you can actually rotate much more accurately in that sense. But that's kind of like a static rotational case. You can get to that precision. When you start moving, there is some cross-coupling effect because of the errors. So if you're trying to move in one direction, you might get disturbances in like the height, for example, or the rotations. So if you're trying to move, your precision does go decrease. But in a steady state scenario, you can get very precise. And if you're moving, just kind of move slowly, you can stay precise, right? The faster you move, the less accurate it gets. You get some like overshoot and stuff. But yeah, you kind of see the example here. So this, we got working on our test bench in the lab. We'll be basically trying to repeat this downstairs on a bigger system pretty soon. Yeah, any questions on this? No. Great, let's go to the next slide. So yeah, the timeline for the bigger system, basically in 2018 was when the MEG table prototype was designed. That table was a different design than the bigger MEG floor we're building now. So the MEG table, the coils were quite a bit smaller, and they were actually not in a grid pattern, they were offset. So each row was offset from the other. So after we got, that was just kind of a proof of concept, also to showcase levitating disk magnets, because that's something that hasn't really been done in my research before. But then after that, we went to designing the megalith floor for the big system. And so that was in 2019. Most of the design work was done. In 2020, the construction was started. Most of the major work of construction was finished kind of towards the end of last year. And then from kind of now till then, then till now, we basically just done some minor tweaks in that and been focusing on our prototype systems, getting rotation working on those. So now we've got rotation working on our prototypes, we're going to move down to the big system and feed it there. And then that's kind of just showcasing that the system works, our construction's all finished, all that stuff. Going into the future, it's all about now improving the performance of the system and getting it ready for more real-world applications. So you saw like with the early table videos, like it was a bit shaky and stuff like that. So you can improve the model for the force and torque estimation for the coils, and field modeling, all that kind of stuff. Improve your controller design, instead of simple PID controllers and more advanced controllers. The design of the carrier levitating can be improved, certainly. Different designs have many other advantages. And yeah, so all of that we'll be working on in the future and improving the system. Let's go to the next slide. So this is kind of like a vision for maybe a couple years from now. So basically in the megalo floor down there, we plan to have the carriers basically moving around this platform and then interacting with robots for the flexible manufacturing kind of demonstration. So you can have robots that would then manipulate a workpiece on top of this carrier. One possible use is actually in kind of machining processes themselves. So you can imagine like you had a weld, like one of the robots could weld a piece, for example, and you can actually use the platform to maneuver the piece below the welding tip. Or like if you're laser etching something like that, doing all kinds of different things, you can actually use this as part of the process instead of just transporting it around. You can also use the system to magnetically lock any carrier in place for whatever you want to work with it at that location. So the carriers can move in any direction, they can move at varying speeds, so like a normal conveyor system, whatever's on the belt moves same direction, same speed, right? With this system, it doesn't matter. And then you can kind of lock it wherever you want, do whatever you want, high precision motion, right? So you can imagine that this can, like in the end goal could be accurate to like the micro scale. So you can do high precision machining just directly with the platform, as well as maneuvering, yeah.
How cost efficient is this? As opposed to the typical mechanical conveyor belts we have now, right?
Yeah, so this system, we kind of showed in previous slides, I think it was about close to like $1 million to construct. But it is meant for like high precision, flexible manufacturing scenarios, right? So it's not meant for like replacing conveyor systems in every factory. It's kind of a more specific application. Yeah.
So generally speaking, if we're talking about magnetic levitation systems, they're better on small scale, right?
Yeah.
But why not use linear motors in this scenario? Because they might be just better, because on large scale, induction machines work better than magnetic machines, right?
Yeah, so with this system, with smart designs, you can actually bring the cost down quite a bit. But also, it does have a few other advantages, one of them being contactless, right? So if you want to do manufacturing where you need like a clean room application, you need like a dustless environment, you need like minimal vibrations, all that kind of stuff. Using like linear motors would have vibrations and all that kind of thing. So this takes away all of those problems. And then it is also very responsive. Like with this system, it can react almost instantly. So it has many advantages, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of this levitation floor, like the assembly process, are you guys kind of aiming more like in the field of like chip design or like semiconductors design because of the precision? Because
yeah, it'd be more like electronics design probably, manufacturing. But looking at like the nanoscale like CPU manufacturing, that's more different than this. Like this couldn't quite get to the nanoscale accuracy with this system, but more like microscale it can handle. Yeah. Yeah.
What about supercooling? Because I've been doing some research into maglevs recently, and some systems work really well when supercooled, because you get about zero resistance, right?
Yeah.
So is that something you guys will be looking into, or
We probably won't be looking into it for this design, no, but it is a potential application, a potential application to use. Supercooling the coils though is difficult, right? It adds a lot of complexity. Even just cooling the system, like that's also a design aspect that you can look into. We're just using fans, so we have basically the aluminum frames below it, and then we have an air conditioning system embedded actually in the floor of the RoboHub. So that's partly why it's in the floor. There's actually ductwork going along the sides, and there's an air conditioning unit that blows across it. In our lab, we just have big fans basically, but other groups use like water cooling and stuff. If you're trying to supercool it, that's a very, very complex cooling system. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay.
Yeah, actually, that's all for our presentation today. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for we actually do have a little sheet here and some magnets. If you want to feel what eddy current damping feels like, so this is a 2-inch magnet.
But for that, make sure that you don't have any